economic security as a kind of foundational thing. Everybody needs access to the American dream of economic opportunity, but with a recognition that we have to be in solidarity with groups and constituencies in this country that are being attacked recklessly, and show that we stand with those groups. So we knit those two things together. We do it in a positive way. We don't wring our hands about who our next standard bearer is going to be as Democrats. That will come. It's better to build a foundational message that's strong. I like to say, as a party, we should be candidate ready, not candidate dependent. We shouldn't be waiting around for the candidate to swoop in and say, okay, here's what you should believe. We should set a foundation about the core principles that matter to us, and then a candidate will emerge who can embrace that and take us across the finish line electorally. But it's a very important point, and I urge you to think about and respond to candidates and others who are putting forward a positive, affirmative set of goals, policy priorities, and principles that represent the Democratic Party.
The one on the end?
Yes.
I was wondering if you might have more information and possibly have some involvement in a major problem that's nationwide and local. It was in the newspaper. The medical examiner in Maryland is just absolutely overwhelmed with the drug overdoses.
Yes.
And a lot of this is coming in from El Salvador across the border. And you are probably maybe aware of the rape case in Rockville that came up with a little girl. I've been trying to convince myself a 14-year-old girl had free consent with a 15-year-old guy and a 19-year-old guy from a country that has a lot of bad drugs and torture and gangs.
Yeah, well, so as I understand that case, I think the original theory of that case was kind of wiped away recently. And so I hesitate to jump to some of the conclusions people were reaching early on around that particular case. I think it's been reevaluated. But on this broader issue of the opioid epidemic, that crisis, it's definitely the case that every community now is being touched by this. We're obviously seeing it in Maryland. It's one place, actually, of potential cooperation among Republicans and Democrats. We actually passed a bill in the last session that will help to address this crisis across the country. We need to put more money behind it, and we're trying to encourage Republicans to do that. But this is a public health crisis of the first order, and we need to look at it through that lens. And I think what's beginning to shift is this idea of handling drug addiction in a punitive way, recognizing it as a public health crisis and treating it that way, and bringing supports and resources to people. The incredible thing about these Medicaid cuts, and one reason we were pushing on Governor Hogan to stand against them, is that they've actually increased the opportunity for treatment services for people that are impacted by this addiction crisis. The Medicaid expansion did. And so the governor in our state has made a big point of addressing the opioid crisis. But if he means that, then he needs to fight hard to keep the Medicaid program strong, because that's actually supporting a lot of families out there. I have authored some legislation that passed with respect to the opioid crisis in terms of being able to co-prescribe naloxone at the time certain medications that can be addictive are prescribed, and examining best practices there. But we have to look at both sides of this equation. What's the treatment on the back end of people that are facing addiction? But we also have to look at the prescribing practices on the front end. And you compare us to every other peer nation around the world in terms of the prescribing practices. They're much more liberal in terms of what's offered up to patients. on the front end. So we have to address pain and severe pain, for example, but we got to be careful about how we prescribe. And this is a situation, this epidemic is on a trajectory right now, an upward trajectory. Getting a handle on it is not going to be easy, but we have to do it. And by the way, when I say epidemic, if you use the clinical definition of what an epidemic is, the opioid crisis in this country meets that definition. So it really is an epidemic. Yes?
Yeah, I had a question about your work with the Energy and Commerce Committee.
Yeah.
And what sort of challenges are you facing trying to put forth sound energy policy and legislation when you're dealing with a completely clueless Secretary of Energy?
Well, he wanted to get rid of that agency. Until it was going to be better. Well, look, let's not pretend that all our efforts to move the energy portfolio towards the clean energy side of the spectrum, that's going to be able to continue in any kind of meaningful way during the Trump administration. The fact of the matter is Scott Pruitt, who's now in charge of the EPA, is an absolute lapdog for the oil and gas and coal industry. Rick Perry at the Department of Energy, it kind of speaks for itself and it's not making anything meaningful. But I think I said this before, or maybe I didn't yet. If you look at what's happening in these agencies, and I'm paying a lot of attention to that, it's harder for the public to see that. Essentially what they're doing is they're locking the doors, they're pulling down the shades, and they're ransacking these agencies. So at EPA, for example, you know, Pruitt's in there with his team, just pulling clean air and clean water regulations off the shelves and just handing them to the oil and gas industry and saying, you know, do what you want with these things. And that kind of behavior is being repeated in a lot of these agencies behind closed doors. We're trying to bring some accountability there. And, you know, to a large extent, the Democrats' efforts for the next couple of years at least is going to have to be stopping bad things from happening. Maybe there'll be an initiative that comes along, like an infrastructure thing, where we can get bipartisan support and actually deliver something productive for the American people. But I think for the most part, we've just got to try to preserve and protect as much as we have. I mean, the fights coming on the budget for 2018 are going to be dramatic. I mean, we were able to secure pretty decent funding through September by extending the FY17 budget. But the so-called skinny budget that Mick Mulvaney is putting together, I mean, the Chesapeake Bay program being reduced from $76 million to $3 million, I mean, that's essentially getting rid of it. Cutting money for research, cutting money for the State Department, doing the kind of sort of soft power initiatives and public diplomacy overseas that are so important for our country and its reputation, and the list goes on and on and on. This is where we need to reach out to Republicans who, for years, have been generally supportive of the core functions of government and say to them, you can't let this happen. We hold the purse strings under Article 1. Let's make sure the budget, you know, makes some common sense for the American people. So we'll be working on that. And actually having the advocacy of the public around these key priorities is going to be very critical to that fight.
I don't have a question, I have a request.
Yes.
If you're going to be sitting down with Mr. Perez and Mr. Ellison, would you please ask them to commit more resources, party resources, to what's happening in Montana, and what's happening in Georgia, with Mr. Quist and Mr. Ellison?
Yeah, I will relay that message. I mean, of course, I think the election is tomorrow in
Thursday.
I'm also going to petition them to put more dollars generally into grassroots organizing around the country. Because I think as a party, we've gotten into this mindset, and candidates can fall into this mindset as well. You sort of husband your money, your resources, you sort of gather it up, and you wait for the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks of a campaign because you figure, oh, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money on television and media and all that kind of stuff. So you basically seed the organizing opportunity for the you know, the 18 or 20 months up until that point. Well, the other side's been very smart about organizing around that. They've been doing that for decades, to tell you the truth. And they've created infrastructure, political and electoral infrastructure across the country, which has put them in a very enviable position politically. So I'd like to see the DNC, and actually I talked to Perez about this the other day. He brought it up unsolicited, that they're going to start looking at, you know, 12-month organizers that are going into, frankly, many communities across the country where Democrats should have won, but did not. And keep in mind, there were hundreds of thousands, including thousands of people in critical states that we lost, of people who voted twice for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump. We have our work cut out for us to make sure we go bring those people back to the Democratic Party.
Thank you.
It's pretty, it's pretty clear the American Health Care Act will return to the House of Representatives in a different state than it left.
Yeah.
What specifically will you do to affect that? And I don't mean just vote or issue statements. I mean, what can you do personally, either lobbying within, will your subcommittee be part of that reconciliation, or are you asked?
It's possible that they'll pull together a conference committee, which is where you get representatives of the House and Senate come together to kind of examine a joint piece of legislation that's moving along. Although Republicans haven't been much interested in sort of operating by what we call regular order, which would include that kind of a vehicle. Over the last few years, they generally haven't been doing that. I think that taking these things sequentially, the first fight is to make sure that whatever the Senate passes is substantially different, obviously, from what the House is.